Good evening, everyone. My name is Alice, and from Clique, and we're very happy today to have Geraldine. She's the technical director of Domaine with us. Clique has been handling this portfolio for 5 years now, Geraldine?
Yes, yeah. Right.
It's about 5 years now, I think, and we've been visiting the vineyards over the last 5 years. And lovely memories that we have at the Domaine that you can see from the background behind. And we've got lunches, we've got tastings, we've seen the Clos Diallo just besides the Domaine, the beautiful blue gates. Well, and unfortunately, this year, we cannot visit Burgundy. So we cannot continue to taste the wines at the Domaine. And so here we are on a virtual wine tasting, but nevertheless, thank you very much for putting this together with us over the last 3 to 4 days. Geraldine has been taking photos of the vineyards, doing a little bit of videos. We wish we could see we wish you could be at the vineyards like now. But connectivity at the vineyards are not very good. So because of that, yes. Yeah, so because of that, Geraldine has done that offline for us. And Emerson has put together the videos, the PowerPoint presentation. So let me hand the introduction over to Geraldine now, and they will take over the stage. Please enjoy, Geraldine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alice. Thank you to invite Domaine de l'Arlo and me for this session. It's special to make some tasting with some virtual tasting, but we will try to discuss together. And if you have after some questions, please don't hesitate. To introduce the Domaine, first, we can start with the history, because even if Domaine de l'Arlo is new domain, in fact it's very old, because the domain of the vineyard, more precisely, existed since the French Revolution, just after the French Revolution, but the name was the name of the family at this moment. So during 1 century, the domain belonged to one family called Vienno, which were this family were very important in Nuit Saint-Georges. They created, when I say that, it's the father and the son after, they created the Clos de l'Arlo. So the walls all around the vineyard were created at this moment. At the same time of the vineyard, so the appellation. After 1 century, no direct descendant, so we decided to sell to another family, famous also in Saint-Georges, called Belin family. During this century, this family participated to the improvement of the vineyard with the second big appellation. We say the first appellation, but the second monopoly with the creation, called Clos des Forêts Saint-Georges. They also participated to the creation of the Clos du Chapeau with the appellation Côte de Nuit Village. And it's important to say that they created also a park, because before, a long time ago, inside the Domaine de l'Arlo, there were a quarry. It was the place of the exploitation of the limestone from Remont-Prissé. It's a pink limestone, very famous at this moment. We mentioned this for the soil analysis, so after we will see this. But it was very important, the quarry. And at the end of the exploitation of the quarry, the owner decided to build a park. So inside the domain, we have now a park with a lot of trees, and inside a Lebanon cedar, a very old Lebanon cedar. When I say very old, it's more 200 years. Yes, so it's very old. After, it's the same with the Vienno family. There were no direct descendants after the family Belin, the Belin's family. So they decided to sell. A lot of people here in Promoprisset wanted to buy the domain, but not really the domain, the vineyard, some part of the vineyards. And AXA Millésine, which is like AXA, but the specialization is the vineyard. AXA Millésine decided to buy the buildings, the vineyard, and with this to keep the monopoles and the history. So in 1987, Domaine de l'Arlot was created, the name Domaine de l'Arlot was created, and Domaine de l'Arlot, because l'Arlot, even if it's the name of the vineyard, it's also the name of the small river just below the vineyard. So Domaine de l'Arlot was created, and also with AXA Millésine, we improve the size of the domain with the Vaune Romanée Premier Cru des Suchots and Romanée Saint-Vivant. So now we can say that we are a young domain with a lot of history, and nowadays we have 15 hectares in total, 2 monopoles with the appellation Nuit Saint-Georges Premier Cru. The first one, Clos des Forêts, when I say the first one with the size, because it's more than 7 hectares, and the second one, it's Clos de l'Arlot. Maybe we can continue with the picture.
And the next slide.
The next one, maybe. Yes. So I said we have 15 hectares, the 2 monopoles, white and red, for Clos de l'Arlot, the Clos des Forêts Saint-Georges. We are located in Promoprisset. So Promoprisset, it's we belong to Nuit Saint-Georges. We belong to the appellation Nuit Saint-Georges, but we are in the south of the Côte de Nuit, the south of the Nuit Premier Cru, and it's also important to remember Promoprisset, because when we will taste after the red, it's a special style, the wines from Promoprisset. It's not the style of the Nuit, the north appellation. It's not the south appellation. It's the Nuit of Promoprisset. It's very special, the style. So I mentioned also the different terroirs inside the Clos de l'Arlot with the quarry, but there's also a different style of soil between Clos de l'Arlot and Clos des Forêts Saint-Georges. And it's written also the importance of the quarry for the history, for the landscape, and after for the explanation of the different soils and the different wines inside the place of l'Arlot. The next one, maybe. This shows the map. For this map, we can see on the same map the different appellation for the domain. I didn't say, but the domain is certified in organic culture. So it's important to mention first. Here in this map, we can see the different appellation and the 15 hectares in total. We start with the appellation Bourgogne Haute Côte de Nuit, white, red, we have both, just above the Clos des Forêts Saint-Georges. We see also the location of the Clos des Forêts Saint-Georges. Clos des Forêts Saint-Georges is located at the frontier of Remous-Prissé and Nuit Saint-Georges. That's why the style is more the style of a Nuit Saint-Georges that a lot of people expect. And we see also with this map the end of the appellation Côte de Nuit, the end of the appellation, sorry, Nuit Saint-Georges. The end, the last one is the Clos de la Maréchale. After it's the appellation Côte de Nuit Village with the Clos du Chapeau. And after, if we continue, normally it's not possible to see here, but it's the Côte de Beaune. So it's a very special location. And with this, in this map, it's not possible to see the Beaune Romanée and Romanée Saint-Vivant, but I think it's possible to see on this next picture. Yes, this one. So it's another map, but in fact, it's very close to Nuit Saint-Georges. And it's also easy when we pick up the grapes because we don't have a lot of time during the last, for example, the Suchot and the winery. So we keep the grapes, we keep the freshness, and it's very short. Okay.
Oh, Geraldine.
Yes.
Oh no, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
We continue with so you have here the picture about the park. You can see the trees. You can imagine because you have a near part of the cedar, the Lebanon cedar, but you can imagine the place. It was inside the Clos de, it's inside the Clos de l'Arlot, and it was before the place of the quarry, the exploitation of the limestone from Remous-Prissé. And the other pictures show you a side of l'Arlot. So you have on the top a cuvée of Pinot Noir, and on your left Pinot Noir, and on your right Chardonnay, Clos de l'Arlot, the appellation. It's also a place with, it's not only vineyard, it's a beautiful landscape. I said with trees, we have also fruit trees, we have a lot of flowers. So the landscape is very rich, and it's a magic place. And it also contributed to the expression of the atmosphere inside l'Arlot.
Yeah. So many a times, like, you know, when you visit the different domains, they plant the different trees and the flowers to create a ecosystem. Is it the same reason at Domaine d'Arlot?
I don't think first it was the reason, but now we can say that thanks to this, we have a special atmosphere. I don't think it was the reason at the beginning. But right. But I think now we can say it's very important. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And do we have more slides coming up? Yeah. Okay. Yes, I think the next topic that we're talking about is the veraison.
Veraison, yes, because now it's at this moment we can see the change of colors in the vineyard. It starts for a part of them. We have this, for example, for Clos des Forêts Saint-Georges, Clos du Chapeau in 70%, which is very important, but some parts inside the forêt is 0. All the grapes are still green, but in a few days, I think at the end of July, the veraison or the berries, the green berries were completely stopped. Normally the change appears or finished at the end of July.
Yeah. So basically, just to recap a little bit, if you talk about the 2020, so
yes, alors, so
what was it like for the first 6 months before we reached the veraison?
Before veraison, in fact, the year started very quickly. we have less and less winter, less and less cold temperature, and the bud break started early compared to other normal years. So the vine growth were very fast or very quick. Yes, very quick compared to normal years. Now we do, it's the end of the work in the vineyard, at the vineyard, and normally we finish at the beginning of August. We had very beautiful weather, beautiful spring. When I say beautiful, it's not really the word. We don't have a lot of rain during the spring. During summer, less and less. We have some days specific with rain, which is good for the vineyard. But it was very early in general compared to other years or normal years. For example, normally we will start the harvest the 25 of August, which is not really normal. But even if we know it's earlier and earlier, it's more and more. We saw just now, it's a work inside the Clos de l'Arlot. It's it's a machine. It's not a tractor, because the tractor is more heavy, for plowing inside the Clos de l'Arlot. So it's at the end. Now it's finished, this work, since the beginning of the week. But it's to show the work of this machine inside the Clos de l'Arlot. It's a work, or it's a machine very new for l'Arlot, because as I said, it's not too heavy. So for the soil, it's also very interesting. And for this vineyard, you can see, or you can guess, it's very dried. I don't pay attention if we see the veraison or not really, because normally the green, the berries are still green. But it's to show a manner to work, or how we work at l'Arlot.
And do we have any pictures of the veraison, the different bunches, the different colors? So as a technical director, what do you, basically what do you look out for when you see that change in colors?
We pay attention if it's the beginning, if it's continue, and if it's not a stop at the moment, because we know that if we don't have a lot of rain, or if we have a lack of rain, normally we have a sort of stop of veraison. Maybe in August we will see, but maybe inside a grape we have some berries still green. It's possible, but we see also the evolution vineyard after vineyard, or for example inside the Clos des Forêts, if the part of the top, of the bottom, or the middle have started the veraison or not yet, or if it's still the beginning, we see the evolution, the percentage, 15, 17, 100%, if it's finished. You know, we pay attention to this just to be confident, even if we have the moment of the harvest, just to be confident that it's followed.
How long does this last? Days or weeks or entire months?
It depends. Normally it's weeks, but when I say it depends of the weather, of the temperature, of the sun, of the rain. We can have, normally it's 2 weeks approximately, but it depends. 2 weeks, maybe more if we don't have rain. You know, it's there's no rules for this. That's why it's important to see and to control different vineyards to see the evolution. Sometimes we visited the vineyard and we say, oh, it's 40%, and when we return, it's finished. Sometimes it's like this. We have to observe. There's no rules.
Right.
There's no rules.
Maybe let's open up the questions to the attendants, to the participants. You know, if you have questions that you'd like to ask Geraldine about the terroir, about what's happening at the vineyard now, please feel free to unmute yourself and post the questions up. We will probably spend maybe about 5 to 10 minutes on this, before we start the tasting. Yes. Our participants are very quiet.
Maybe it's clear, so thank you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay. We have a question here. We have a question. Okay. So let me speak. How is 2018 for the reds in terms of quality? That's from Maxine.
2018.
Yeah.
For the red, 2018 in general, not in general, in Primo Prissé was very special because we had 3 big storms and 2 hailstorms. And the difference with the Overs appellation or Overs village is that we had rain, we had water. So for us, it was the difference. That's why we, compared to 17, 18, we have more, not more, we have freshness. We have a good balance between the fruit, between the acidity, between the tannins, and not too degrees or too alcohol. Of course, we have more density compared to 17, but it was not too dried or too heavy. I don't know if we can compare with another vintage, but different share for 17. But for me, 18 was a good surprise compared to the beginning of the season, and yes, we can say a good surprise. We started at the 1st of September, and if I remember also, we were the first in Nuit Saint-Georges and Bonne-Romanée. But finally, yes, it's for me, it's good vintage compared to the month of July with the big storms, with the work very difficult at the vineyard at this moment, the pressure with the hail. We thought we lost a lot of production, but in fact, no. So that's why we can say it's a good surprise. I don't know if it's the question.
Okay, so we have another question coming from Mr. Liang. Mr. Liang, I'm going to unmute you. Maybe you can ask the question yourself, so it's more interactive. So I just sent the unmute function. Okay, it seems, okay.
Okay.
Please go ahead. Oh, no mic. Okay, sure. That's very... Okay, anyways, the question is, what about expectation for 2019?
19?
Yes.
19. You know, I think it's really new challenge year after year, because the climate change, because the climatic condition change also, the temperature, the weather. Even if each vintage is different from each other, 19, it's, for example, not for example, maybe I can say that we have, or I was surprised to have more freshness for the red compared to the white. The white, we have freshness, but we have the sensation to have more structure, more aromas, more wines compared to other vintages. And I thought before it was the opposite. I thought we had more freshness for the white and more sugar or more structure for the red. And for me, it's just surprising to see the difference. The surprise were for me with the white and the red, of course, but the red, as I said, we have a lot of freshness, and we didn't. It's not possible. You can say this. It's not possible to say that the year was warm or hot, because the good balance between the acidity and the alcohol. And I think now, maybe it's the surprise in general. Maybe we have to be confident with the vineyard, even if it's warmer and warmer. I think we can keep the freshness if we pay attention to the vineyard and to the beginning of the harvest. And maybe now we have to be more focused of this, to keep the level of sugar and the level of acidity, and to pay attention also to the tasting of the berries. And finally, it's more difficult to say that the weather is warmer and warmer.
Yeah,
it's my feelings.
Yeah. 2019 is one of the warmer vintage, a hot, dry, warmer vintage. And naturally, if you think about it, there's a lot more concentration. And if it's not well managed, you get very sluggish, you get too high in alcohol. Yeah. Is there any techniques, particularly techniques, whether it's being implemented in the vineyards or implemented during vinification to retain the freshness?
No. No, we just have, you know, even if we have some moment of heat wave,
yeah,
it's very specific for each year, each vintage. And for this year, this vintage, we don't have until now heat wave. We have sometimes warmer temperature, but it's each year it's different. And to say how to control or maintain the freshness, maybe we have also to pay attention to the yield, to the volume in the vineyard, the manner to work in general in the vineyard, the moment when we, for example, we see we spoke about plowing just before. You know, we have to think about the weather, but as always, and that's why also it's interesting. Yeah. Each year is different, and I guess, we see this.
I guess, like you say, you can't change Mother Nature. You know, the best thing is to accept what comes to you and to react and to basically follow your philosophy as much as you can. Yeah. So, Em, I think there's a question, right?
Yes, there's another question from Melvin Yo, and I think this will be the last question before we start tasting the wines, and then there will be another Q&A after tasting the wines. So the question is, hi Geraldine, thanks for sharing your time. From what I've heard or read, the tradition of your predecessors was to have heavy stem inclusion in the wines. What is your opinion on stem inclusion, and do you see yourself changing this practice going forward?
We continue this, but it's the same. And I said before, there's no rules. So we have some vintages with whole bunch, and some others with less or no. It depends. It depends of the. It depends of the year. It depends of the maturation of the stamp. It depends of the weather. It depends of the. When I say the temperature, when we pick up the grapes, you know, it's better to, you know, when it's more than 20 or almost 30 degrees, it's more difficult after to have a cold harvest. So we have to adapt also the technique with the weather. So we continue, but not systematic.
Thank you.
Okay, now we can start the tasting.
Okay. First wine, that's oh.
I come back.
Okay.
First one will be this.
The Nuit Saint George, Le Jabot. And this is, Geraldine, can I say that it's a declassified Premier Cru White?
Yes. We say this. We are inside the Clos de l'Arlot with La Gerbotte. It's a specific side and specific place, just next to a part next to the park, next to the Clos de la Maréchale, you can see on the picture. So it's a place with more shadow compared to another place or compared to the Clos de l'Arlot. It corresponds to the youngest vines, young vines. It's the soil, it's like it's written, it's white limestone at the top of the Clos de l'Arlot. And it also corresponds to the clonal selection. So since the beginning, because also it's a different side and different part inside l'Arlot, it's a sort of declassification of the Premier Cru into a village for this one. It's exactly.
So when you say that it's a younger vines, how young is young?
Young because it was planted in 1992, 1993, and the last part in 2006. So it's young vines compared to the older vines with the appellation Clos de l'Arlot, planted in 1984 and 1955. So it's the different part. Different exposition and different soil also for l'Arlot.
And when you say that it's within the Clos de l'Arlot, are all the Chardonnay vines concentrated at a single location, or it can be scattered throughout different rows?
We have inside the Clos de l'Arlot, so the part next to the Clos de la Maréchale, it's only Chardonnay. The part we say inside the amphitheater, we have into this part at the top Pinot Noir, the middle Chardonnay, and the bottom Pinot Noir again. To say why, I don't know. It's like this with the history. The soil is important for this part. Because as I said, inside the Clos de l'Arlot, it was a quarry and we have different type of soil. For La Gerbotte, it's white limestone. For the other side, Clos de l'Arlot, so in the middle, it's pink limestone, so limestone from Premaux-Prissé. At the bottom, Clos de l'Arlot red, it's marl, which is unusual. So it's all this which is very important and interesting because the Clos de l'Arlot, it's only 4 hectares, 2 for the white, 2 for the red. For La Gerbotte, it's 1 hectare and 1 for the Clos de l'Arlot, white. Right. So it's the the difference also with Gerbot and Clos de l'Arlot is with Gerbot, for each vintage, we have a wine with a lot of freshness. It's mostly, we can say, lemon aromas compared to the Clos de l'Arlot, more exotic aromas, apricot, pineapple. But we have more minerality with Gerbot, or minerality without saying more. It's two different styles inside the Clos de l'Arlot.
Yeah. And just to highlight a little bit, the reason why we cannot show you guys a tasting bottle of the Clos de l'Arlot Blanc is because the allocation is so small. I have only the Gerbot to show. So.
Because the production, even if it's 1 hectare for Gerbot and 1 hectare for Clos de l'Arlot, the production is not the same. So we have less for Clos de l'Arlot.
Yes. Yeah, but I think we're all tasting the Gerbot now, and it's very delicious. I mean, it shows the beautiful notes of buttery. It's not okay, but it has nice freshness and mineral to it. Yeah.
It's never okay for Gerbot and Arlot in general. For the white, we use, so all the maturation, the élevage is in barrels, but we use at the maximum 20% of new oak every year. 20% of new oak. So it's important to, because we have freshness since the beginning, to keep until the bottling and after, without too much oak aromas.
So when was the last time you tasted your 17?
A long time.
So are you happy with how is it showing today?
No, yes, because I like this vintage. It's we say for Burgundian people, it's typical Burgundian vintage, because we will see after, but for the red, it's more evident. For the red, we don't have a lot of color. We don't have a lot of tannins. And it's just the normal expression of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. You know, it's after vintage with a lot of color, with a lot of density, or very easy for the extraction, to have this vintage. You know, it's interesting, but because sometimes you forget the characteristic, the first characteristic of Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is a grape variety normally without a lot of color, without a lot of tannins, very delicate, and it's the characteristic of 17. It's this typical vintage. So it's a pleasure to have maybe less alcohol, just a few quantity less, but less alcohol compared to other vintages. And it's a pleasure also after 16, because 16 we had a big frost and we lost a lot of quantities. And you know, it's interesting to see a different vintage, a different expression of the wines, and for me, it's pleasant. It's a very pleasant vintage, 17.
Okay, why don't we move to the reds? I can't show the Clos de l'Arlot Blanc, but I'm showing the Clos de l'Arlot Rouge.
Yeah. So Clos de l'Arlot Rouge, I said just before, we are here with this appellation in Promauxisé. So it's a style very different compared to the north and the south of Nuit Saint-Georges. The style of Promauxisé, it's very elegant wine, and when you are in a blind tasting, it's very difficult to put the appellation, to put the right appellation. Because for me, in a blind tasting, we can say it's like a Volnay or like a Chambol. It's with Larlo, we have a wine very fine. It's very elegant. It's not black fruit, but red fruit with strawberry aromas. It's very floral. Also, it's you know, we, even if I don't like to say this, but we have feminine wine and masculine wine in the appellation Nuit Saint-Georges, and this is the illustration of a feminine wine. You know, the tannins are very delicate, and the wine in general, it's like a perfume. This appellation for me. It's so on the map, on the picture here, it's the part of the left picture at the bottom. And you can see on the right picture also, you can see the slope for the Chardonnay, the difficulty also to work inside this appellation. But next to the houses at the bottom, the part here, it's Clos de Larlo. Marl, soil, we say very old vineyard compared to others. And so the plantation, yes, it's 1955, and I say for the white, it's not 55, I say 55, it's 59, and 2000 for the red. It's a very specific wine. It's unusual to have this characteristic with the appellation Nuit Saint-Georges, but it's also interesting in general to see the evolution of this appellation since a long time. Before, a lot of people thought Nuit Saint-Georges was an appellation with a lot of tannins, we can say rustic. And it was true, but since last year, it's completely the opposite. We have more elegance, we pay more attention to the vineyard, we pay more attention to the vinification. And now we can say, even if we can say in Pommeau Prissé, but in general in Nuit Saint-Georges, we have more elegant wines. The difficulty for this appellation also is that we don't have Grand Cru. So we don't have a famous or a big reference compared to others appellation. And I think it's more difficult to explain this appellation without Grand Cru. We have a lot of Premier Cru. It's a big appellation, the north, the south until Vaune-Romanée, the south until Côte de Nuit Village. It's a very big appellation without a big appellation, a big Grand Cru, and maybe it's more difficult compared to a small appellation with Grand Cru, like Chambol, for example, or like Vaune. But that's why it's interesting also to explain Nuit Saint-Georges appellation.
Yes, what is the, well, I mean, the discussion about Grand Cru in Nuit Saint-Georges is, can be left to another session, yeah, but it's always that part where I think it's Nuit Saint-Georges, Clos de Porets, I think that is the closest that could actually attain and fight for the qualification of Grand Cru.
It's Forêt, not Forêt, it's Les Saint-Georges.
Les Saint-Georges, yes, yeah.
Saint-Georges, yes, yeah. Les Saint-Georges, it's...
I think that opened up another discussion and conversation altogether,
yes,
whether
Nuit
Saint-Georges deserves a Grand Cru appellation.
It's a difficult subject. It's difficult to, I think, to have Grand Cru now.
But if you focus and go back to the Clos de Larlo 2017, I think what I find about, when we were preparing the wines, what I find about it 17 is it's very aromatic.
Yes, it's very aromatic, and you know, it was also unusual for this vintage because when I say unusual, the evolution of the characteristic or the evolution of the vintage were, for me, specifically during the élevage. before, during the vinification, you know, I was a little bit worried because I say, oh, it's light. There's not a lot of color. There's not a lot of structure, and yes, it was a little bit disturbing. And so we put in barrels, and after we tasted at different moment during the élevage, and I said, wow, it's surprising because it's completely different from the vinification for the beginning of the élevage. And now we have more structure, we have more tannins, we have more aromas, we have more color also. And it was a vintage, or it's a vintage, very interesting and very important to remember, because, you know, I said sometimes, or not sometimes, now we forget the characteristic of Pinot Noir because the climate change and because it's really easy to extract without to do anything. And to have a vintage like 17, it's good to remember the characteristic of Pinot Noir, and to remember also the aim, the aim of the élevage. Why so long? Why we put in barrels? To have an exchange between the wine and the oxygen, or the outside, thanks to the wood. You know, there are a lot of things we learned, I learned during my studies, and sometimes we forget and we say, oh, no, it's normal. And that's why for me it's a vintage, a typical vintage, or a vintage very Burgundian. And not really easy during the season, because we didn't have a lot of pressure in oidium or mildew. So it was quiet. But for the vinification, it was disturbing and surprising after.
Okay, so why don't we move on to the tasting of the Clos de Forêt, and then continue the discussion about Burgundy, about Pinot Noir. Because to me, I find that the Clos d'Arlos, basically of the gradient where the location of the vineyards is, it gives you a lot of minerality, it gives you a lot of freshness. Clos de Forêt, if I can remember correctly, the gradient is not as steep as Clos d'Arlos. So lesser steepness, you have a lot more mild kind of terroir, a lot more heavier. So with this same grape varietal Burgundy, this is what Burgundy is all about. This is what terroir is all about. So how are you going to bring the difference between the two, Clos d'Arlos and Clos de Forêt?
Clos d'Arlos, Clos Forêt, typically, yes, completely different. Clos de l'Arlos, as I said, it's a very small vineyard. And Clos de Forêt, it's, we can say, the first monopole for us. A big vineyard, it's more than 7 hectares, 7.2 exactly. And we separate this vineyard in 6 parts: the top, the top, the middle, and the bottom, right and left. So it's a vineyard also very, when we say the big vineyard, but also interesting with the characteristic of the soil. At the top, we have white limestone, so the same type of soil compared to La Gerbotte. The middle, we have a part of pink limestone, like the Chardonnay inside l'Arlos. And at the bottom, we have limestone from Ladois, which is unusual. Ladois is in the Côte de Beaune, and we are in the Côte de Nuit. But it's also the characteristic of this appellation, this terroir, this Clos de Forêt. I forget what I wanted to say. We'll come back after. So I said 6 different parts for the vinification. It depends of the year because it depends of the volume. But normally we use 6 tanks for this appellation. And there's also a difference with the different ages inside the Clos des Forêts. You can see here of the plantation, it's there's a lot of difference. We have young part, younger part, older part, and now we complete also the plantation when it's necessary. So it's we have some characteristic for each part, the top, the middle, the bottom, and but the more interesting is the blend because each part is important for the appellation. We have some part more exotic, more fruity, or more black fruit, or more with more tannins, but it's the blend which is very important. 17 was the exception of this because usually we use all the part inside the Clos des Forêts, but for 17 we made the bottling of 2 parts separately, differently compared to the Clos des Forêts Saint-Georges. We will see, we will test after. But for me, the Clos des Forêts is like the terroir. It's like the soil. It's very complete, complex. It's a wine with a lot of black fruit. It's the opposite compared to l'Arlot. It's not, I can't say with more tannins because we don't have more, but it's not the same style of tannins. You can say maybe more strict tannins at the beginning. We can say also with more structure because it's a wines in general, but we wait several years before to taste, before to appreciate. And as it's a complete wine, it's better to taste it with a meal to see and to appreciate the different characteristics, the different aromas. You need time in general, time into your glass to see the evolution of the wine. It's a wine for me very, very complex, like the soil, like the different type of soil. We have inside this vineyard two faults, which is also typical in the Côte de Nuit or in the vineyard in Burgundy. And with these faults, we can have a different type of soil, different characteristic, different expression. We have the same grape variety, but it's not the same expression of the Pinot Noir of this big vineyard.
Do you enjoy making Clos des Forêts or more? I mean, if you was to choose Clos d'Arlot and Clos des Forêts. Clos d'Arlot, you're limited to just that plot. Clos des Forêts, you have 6 different parcels. You have 6 different wines that you can taste, and you can whether or not it's to perfect that blend, or to have that opportunity, to cover whatever that you're not able to find in certain blend. So if you was to say, which one do you have more challenges? Which one do you prefer?
It's different. We can, before someone spoke about all bunches, we can make some experiments inside Clos des Forêts. We know before harvest, for example, normally this part, it's interesting to use all bunch compared to another one. And we can see years after years if it's true or not. If it depends on the vintage or if we have a sort of line, you know. It's it's difficult to say I prefer to L'Arlo or Forêt. It's not true. I like Arlo because the expression is really different and typical of this appellation. Clos des Forêts, it's different because each part is different, and we can see sometimes a difference, or sometimes it's not true. We can there's no preference. It's another manner to work. It's different. It's another expression of Pinot Noir. It's another expression of fruit, and it's more important to see this evolution of the fruits in general. In general, black fruit, red fruit, is it true? For example, one year, do we have floral aromas or more exotic aromas? Because sometimes we have, even if it's Pinot Noir, even if it's red wine, we have sometimes some characteristic of exotic aromas. You know, it depends, but there's no preference for me.
Yeah, obviously, and I'm sure these 6 different parcels make a difference, and I'm sure you found something special about one of the parcels because you created the next wine, Cuvée Orline.
Cuvée, yes, Cuvée Orline or line, yes, for this vintage. So there's different reason, you know. Sometimes we make some blend of different parts since the vinification, and sometimes it's not possible. It depends of the volume, it depends of the yield, it depends of the year. For this vintage, we blend for vinification 2 different parts, and the technique was also different, because for the Clos des Forêts, for the other tanks of Clos des Forêts, all was distilled. For this specific tank or cuvée, we had 75% of all bunch. So since the beginning, it was different. Normally, it's interesting to blend, to have something I said complete for this appellation. But for this vintage, from the beginning until the moment, or until before the bottling, the expression, the tasting between Clos des Forêts, each tank, a blend of all tank, and this part was different. And the choice was to make the bottling, or to bottle separately this cuvée from the rest of the Clos des Forêts. So Cuvée Orline, it's not like Petit Play, you know before. It's not the youngest vines. It's not something characteristic. It's a north and a south part. You can say bottom, middle, and the bottom part. It's the opposite, in fact. But I think because of thanks, we use this technical point with the whole bunch. All the rest was different, and the characteristic of this cuvée is maybe at the beginning of after the bottling, we have a wine more, I say before, masculine for the Clos des Forêts, but maybe Orline is more masculine compared to the Forêt, or more strict, we can say. The tannins are more present. It's a wine, for me, we can keep longer compared to Forêt, longer because we need more times to have the blend between the different component inside this this blend. And also maybe because we have more old bunch compared to the Clos des Forêts or the rest of the vineyard inside the Clos des Forêts. But I think this characteristic for this vintage was important. And that's why even if we use the technique of old bunch, it's not systematic. Sometimes it's interesting to make the blend. Sometimes we have inside the blend something less interesting. So it's that's why it's a good thing to have a big vineyard because we can make some experiments like this.
I think that's the part about Clos des Forêts, because you have all the different parcels.
Exactly.
You have the possibility to taste whether or not it's due to the terroir, whether or not it's due to the vines, and to be able to create something to taste and to be able to blend it. Yeah, if ever to know the typicity of each area.
Exactly. So we have this cuvée specific or line for 2017. We don't have for 18 because 18 was more homogeneous or more, yes, we can say normal. No differences inside each cuvée. Maybe we will have another specific cuvée one year or one vintage, but it's not decided before. See, we see the evolution during the élevage, the evolution of the characteristic for the vinification, and after we decide.
So why don't we move to the north, Vosne Romane?
Yeah.
So shall we taste the Souchot now?
Yes, we can taste the Souchot.
Yes,
we can taste the Souchot.
You're going up towards the north, Route de Bancourt, right? Yes, correct. So
yeah, we forget the appellation Nuit Saint-Georges, and we go in the north, in the north with Vosne Romane.
So, and that is a property that's added over the last just just now you said 1980,
1992, if I remember, 1993, 1991, the beginning of the 90s.
Beginning of the 90s, where land prices was not that expensive yet.
Exactly. Now it's not possible.
Well, Souchot is located beside Romani Saint-Vivant, and some of the biggest names like come from Souchot, comes from Romani Saint-Vivant. Yes, and it must be exciting and must be lovely to be able to make a wine from Souchot.
Yes, it's to have another village, you know, to have Nuit Saint-Georges, it's good to vinify some appellation Nuit Saint-Georges, it's very interesting. But to have also another characteristic with Vosne Romane, it's also very interesting and important for the domain. It's a very small production for us. In total, with Romane Saint-Vivant, it's a little bit more than 1 hectare. But the production of Vosne Premier Cru Les Souchots, it's comfortable for us. And it's also very interesting, we can say, during a tasting, to taste Souchot. Souchot is the bigger appellation in general inside Vosne, very famous. A lot of people produce some Souchot, and I think the AXA Millésime decided to buy an interesting vineyard, interesting place. We have a good location for this vineyard. It's approximately, not approximately, it's 0.85 hectare for Souchot. We taste after Clos des Forêts, but now, or more and more, we taste just after l'Arlot. For different reasons. For me, the characteristic of the tannins are very close with l'Arlot. It's very fine wine, very fine tannins. And some years also we have some similarities with the aromas. We can find some strawberry aromas like Clos de l'Arlot, and some floral also aromas. But we have, of course, the typical like pepper.
2017 Clos de Souchon.
Yes, but I have a lack of spicy. Yes.
Spicy. Yes.
Spicy aromas. Voilà. For Souchon. You know, the notes are very different with, and it's normal compared to Clos des Forêts, but we have some similarities with l'Arlot. The side very elegant, very fine, very feminine, we can say. But it's also like the Clos des Forêts, necessary to keep several years before to taste, because it's better some years in bottles to have a better blend between all the components.
I think, like you say, the similarity is seamless throughout all the bottles of 2017 we're tasting. Is the elegance that I'm picking out, is the freshness that I'm picking out, and the aromatics that I really like about this vintage. Yes, and what about in your own words? In your own words, what do you like about the 2017? And how do you think, because couple of questions that I always ask myself is, how long can you keep this vintage for? And when will you drink it? Yeah.
Good question. We say it was more drinkable young compared to 16, 18. I'm not really sure. In fact, it's for me more and more difficult to have an idea of the moment of potential of aging. I think it's easier to keep longer, but the difference also with the wines of 20 years, I think the characteristics since the beginning are completely different. The tannins are not aggressive since compared to before, and we don't need to wait. We don't need to wait several years before to taste, before to appreciate, because the tannins are too strong. Now it's not true. So I think for each vintage, we can drink, we can appreciate the wines young, and more people want to drink young wines. For me, I like to keep the freshness and the
balance,
the acidity, yes, and the balance.
Yeah.
And even if I appreciate sometimes old wines, I think now we can drink wines younger compared to 20 years ago. And after, it's more difficult to say you can drink 17 before 18, because it depends of the producer, it depends of the appellation, it depends of the wines since the beginning. So I want to say now that 17 you can drink before 18, but maybe it's not true at the end of the year, and maybe next year it will be not true. We try to keep the freshness, and I think it's important to drink wine with freshness. for me.
Yes, and I think that will lead us to the 2003 vintage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For
2003, yes.
hang on. For 2003, can I actually invite my participants to
Of course.
talk a little bit about it, because we have a little bit of issues over here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now to talk about challenges and what Wine Clique did in preparing all these bottles. Okay, the bottles were open, tasted, and we put them to small little valves that you all having in your hands, and then we had put in the argon gas to protect the wine and to store it in a temperature control cellar at 13 degrees. And what we are feeling now is the 2003 on my glass. The nose on my glass is a little bit tired. It's a bit stewed. Okay, it's heavy. Yesterday when we opened the bottle, it's a fresh bottle. It was, it has that bouquet. So like I said, why don't I open up to the participants to let all of them speak a little bit more about the problems. And I think in my own personal opinion and my knowledge, 2003 was nonetheless a very, very warm vintage. It was not easy to manage the fruits. It was not easy to manage the alcohol. It was not easy to manage the freshness, and how long the balancing of all these things was. So Geraldine, I'm not going to put you in a spot because you joined the Domaine in 2014.
Yes.
Yes, you joined the Domaine in 2014. So I think maybe the discussion goes to say, because I can't even speak to you about the wine because your bottle is different from my bottle. Your
Yes.
bottle is direct from the Domaine.
Yes, but it's I can understand also it's difficult to test this sort of vintage after 17. When we taste this one, it's I tasted one time during a vertical testing, so it's easier because we have 2004, 2002. 2004, it's not really famous in Burgundy. 2003, in general, it's we can have a very good surprise and very bad surprise. For this vintage, you said it's true. It was a year with very hot temperature, with heat wave, a long time. It was the only 1 year of this specific vintage we pick up in August. So I was not at L'Arlot, but in another domain in the Côte de Nuit. And I remember, because it was my first year, we started the 21th of August with Grand Cru. So I remember because it's a normal, and we were afraid about the characteristic of the final wines, because some producers started the harvest in August. Some others, they said, no, I decided to change nothing, and we will start in September. And finally, it was very interesting to taste after the difference between the different producers, between different appellations, and after several years. Because even if you don't have a good bottle, I know for Le Clos des Forêts 2003, we keep the freshness. We have the freshness. Of course, it's older older wines, so we don't have the same freshness compared to a young wines. But it's not normally a heavy wine, and even if it's not too exuberant in nose, it's a mouth very pleasant. The tannins are maybe a little bit strict or dried at the beginning, but if you wait several moments, several minutes in your glass, you can appreciate better after. But it's 2003, now we are in 2020, and of course it's we can say old wine, old wine, and it's also more difficult after a young wine to compare and maybe to appreciate, but I think it's easier with a vertical wine, vertical tasting. So we say it's a good wine compared to the year, compared to the difficulty of the vintage, and compared to others also, because of course it's more difficult to have a global or to have only one idea of this vintage, because it depends, you know, some producers started at the middle of August and some others at the middle of September. So 1 month for this sort of vintage with very hot temperature, it's very, very important. We don't have a lot of acidity for this vintage. And I think it was difficult to keep the acidity because of the very high temperature. But the manner to work and the beginning of the harvest were very, very important. So it's an old wine, yes, it's more difficult.
Yes, I know. So if you talk about then the 2003, 2000, we are drinking a Nuit Saint George, 2003.
Yeah.
And do you remember whether there's a big difference? Because if you have harvested the Grand Cru, so you're probably in the Côte de Nuit.
Mm.
So
yes, it was the appellation Échezeaux.
Right.
And I don't have memories, because, you know, Échezeaux in general, it's an appellation I never tasted regularly, but it's an appellation with more tannins and more strict tannins, and it's more difficult to make the comparison. And I didn't drink a wine from this vintage since a long, long time. So I have only Clos des Forêts for me to comparison. You know, it's also difficult to compare for us with another appellation, because we don't have a lot of quantity, for example, of Vosne Romanée or Romanée Saint-Vivant for this vintage. So it's maybe not difficult to compare to another appellation.
Right. Okay. Then for me, it's basically for the tasting bottles, for the participants that has received all the tasting bottles, it came from 2 separate bottles. So there might be some bottle variation on how the participants are tasting the different wines now. So from me, I've got 2 different glasses from the 2 different bottles. And what I picked out is one has a slightly, just very, very slightly on the freshness. But in totality, you could feel that this vintage is very stewed. It's you know, you have a very stewed bouquet on the nose. When we opened it, when me and Juliana was tasting the bottles, you feel the freshness, you feel the bouquet. It was shouting at you where the bouquet was bursting out in terms of the dark fruits, in terms of notes. Yeah. But tasting it now, obviously it lost that vibrancy. Instead, what you feel is you do feel that how the heat could have affected the vines, how the heat could have affected how it was being hold on to it. It is not that the wine is of a certain fault now, that it is oxidized or it's in a certain manner, but you could feel that when temperature comes into play, it becomes a discussion on how can you retain the freshness of the wine, which is what that is very important for Burgundy, for Pinots, because Pinots is the highlight of Pinots is to be able to have the acidity, to have the freshness. Yeah.
Yes, right. And, you know, I remember we spoke about whole bunch, and I think, I don't know because I don't have the history for this vintage and this appellation 2003, but I think we have a big part of all bunches for this appellation and vintage. You know, because with this technique, we can have more freshness. Of course, there's an impact and with the acidity, but for the aromas, it's very interesting. For this type of vintage, I think it's also very interesting. The difficulty for this vintage was to find the good balance between the freshness, the fruit, and the acidity, because the acidity was very, very, very low. So we have also, it's important to say that it was a special year and a year very normal in Burgundy between 2002, 2004 first, and since the beginning, for a lot of people, a lot of producers, they said that they didn't see this during their career, during the beginning, since the beginning. It's important to say that there's no comparison. There was no comparison. There was no idea for a lot of people about the decision, what they have to do, what it's interesting to do, what the tannins can improve, how they can improve. You know, it was important just to say this. It was a year very normal, and a lot of people were a little bit lost, we can say.
Well, I think that was a challenge to many, because it's like as a supplier, you know, when you read about it, you read about Indian summer, you read about the amount of the weather, the temperature has gone up, you read about, and Burgundy doesn't allow irrigation, so you read about difficulties in trying to energize the vines.
Exactly. And you have, with this sort of vintage, you have to adapt and to think differently, and that's why sometimes it's very, very interesting, even if it's difficult, even if you don't know, because you know you have another reflection of the manner to work, the manner to approach also the vineyard, the vinification. It's sometimes it's very precise, sometimes you have to invent, sometimes you have to, it's different.
Okay, yes, I've got Emerson with me.
I'm back. Okay, guys, so now is the time for the question and answer. So if you have any questions or any experiences that you experience or taste with the wines, if you think it's expressive, if you think it's close, it's your time now to shine. Please put it on the comment section below, and we're going to address it.
I think I'm going to pull back out one of the conversation. 2003. Do you think over the last 10 years, do you think there's any vintage that's coming as close to 2003?
No. Now, sometimes we say, for example, this year, this vintage, the next vintage, but no, it's we have just some comparison with the moment of the harvest. It will be in August, And now we don't have some comparison with 2003. It's completely different, and I think now we have some lessons compared to this vintage. We can we pay more attention of a lot of things, of temperature, of the vinification, of the extraction, of the different technique. It's completely different. No, we can't compare with this vintage for me. Maybe for others, but for me.
Okay, so I think we have a question that just came in. It's from Maxime Lafarge, and the question is, what about 2019? It was insanely hot in Europe.
19, it was, sorry?
It was insanely hot. So the vintage is very hot in Europe.
Oui. Yes,
yeah.
very hot, like others. I think we have to do with now vintage warmer and warmer. I think we have also to adapt the moment, the day for the harvest, the technical point of the vinification, and the manner to work in the vineyard and in the winery also. To say after that it's warmer, or yes, warmer in for the wines, I don't know.
Well, if you talk about the technique on harvesting, you know, you read about other wineries, not in Burgundy, harvesting at night, where it's much cooler. Does regulations in Burgundy allow, and what do you think about it?
It's these techniques are very, I think, very interesting, but we can't allow it for the domain. We can't change everything in the winery. So that's why I say we have to adapt. We pay attention to, for example, to cold fermentation at the beginning. We try to have cold temperature since the beginning. Sometimes it's not possible because the temperature inside during the harvest is warmer, and we have to do with. But we pay attention to each step during the vinification, during the élevage. You know, so I spoke about cold maceration. Now we do less and less
What, whole bunches?
Punching. All bunches. It depends. For this vintage, so 19, we use a lot of all bunches. Yes, right. And maybe it's thanks to this we keep the freshness and the acidity. Also, you know, sometimes it's difficult to explain with only one reason why we keep or why we can keep the freshness. But maybe for this vintage, all bunches were important to keep the freshness with the different aromas, with the different positive points that we can have with this technique. Maybe because for the red, we can have a lot of freshness for this vintage. It's difficult, yes, to explain, even if we have, because it's more feelings, even if we have warmer vintage, why we have after a vintage with freshness for the wines, you know, sometimes yes, it's more difficult to explain. It's the manner to work, the approach. We try to adapt. We try to think about different technique to keep the freshness. When I say different technique, sometimes it's very stupid, but different moment. It depends.
Okay, another question just came in. So it's from Kelvin Lim, and he asked, can you share which part of Susho your plots are from? I mean, once again, can you share which part of Susho's your plots are from?
From on a map?
Yeah, I will share you the map now.
Yes, maybe it will be easier to explain. It's just front of the appellation Richebourg of the Romanée Conti. Maybe, yes, it's not precise map for Susho. It's not this one. Susho, if no, after or before for the appellations. Maybe the second or third.
I think it's okay. One moment. Okay, is this one?
No, before.
What, the
yes,
plot?
this one.
Here, it's here.
Yes.
So this is the whole map.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
After the next one. Yes, right. So Susho, you have the point here. So it's the end of the vineyard. It's the middle of the parcel for us. We are front of the Richebourg, Romanée Conti, and it's we have the Beaumont. Yes, it's a plot here. We have the point.
Yeah.
It's the plot of L'Arlot. This side. It's like.
Is it joining Le Beaumont?
No.
Is it joining Obolé?
I can I? No. No, it's not until the top of the Susho. We have. I can't show you because it's. I can't control the.
You can't. You want to show?
You can actually share. I will. You can. Okay, you can actually click the bottom share at the bottom of your screen.
I don't have share.
You. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll continue. Yes.
I will stop sharing. So you can enter.
Okay.
Yes, we can see your screen now.
Okay, so where is mine?
Where's your map?
I think it's the same as this.
But I guess when you talk about Burgundy, like you say, it's all about Pinot Noir. The location, the plot, and where everything is makes a huge difference, because that's where you are, the exposition of that role, whether you have shadows, the terroir, everything plays in a part.
We have a little slope for the Susho. You can see here on the map, you see my screen here. You see it or no?
Yep.
Yeah. So the plot for L'Arlot is like this.
So it's actually adjoining Le Richebourg.
It's yes, it's voilà, up. The plot of Susho, it's like this.
I think you need to. Okay, it's blue in color, right?
Yes, I can. I try to change. I'm not very.
Yeah, color contour. Ah, okay.
You see it, and you can say also like this.
So that is the part of social.
Yes, here. Is it more clear?
It is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah? Okay. So this is for us, Susho. You know, Susho, I said it's a very big appellation. You have the top, the bottom of Susho, and we are located here.
Okay.
So you're closer to Richebourg than Romanus and
Yes.
Vivant.
Richebourg or Romanée-Conté is just next to the other side of the road.
So do we have any other questions? Well, Geraldine, in summary, do you just want to have a couple of words about the 2020 vintage?
2020, yeah.
So far, how do you
So
like?
far,
Yes.
we close the domain next week for 3 weeks, and when we will come back, we start the harvest. The 25, I said, normally for 1 week. We will see. We will see if we can keep the freshness. We will see the component. You know, it's too early to say or to imagine the characteristic, to imagine the different things. I have to do maturity control to see the evolution of the acidity during the maturation here, to taste the berries, and to decide after which vineyard we start, if we use whole bunch, which percentage, and the rest. But it's, for me, it's too early to say or to imagine the characteristic of this vintage. I hope not too heavy. We will see if we have rain during the next weeks. We have to pay attention to the weather, to the temperature, to a lot of things until the harvest. I hope no hailstorm for this vintage, and for the rest, we will see.
One more question. 2020, COVID. Okay. Do you think that will have an impact on how the harvest is being done, is going to be done? COVID, you know, you have all the social distancing now.
I don't know.
Is it going to be a problem?
Of what, for example?
If there's no restriction, that's good. We'll leave it as is good then.
No. It's a very specific year, specific vintage with the COVID, as you said. But I hope with this vintage we forget the COVID after several years. But it's more difficult for us to organize the harvest, to organize everything for people. You know, we have a lot of things to, how we can explain?
Organize and everything. But for me,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
With the relation with COVID, with safety rules, you know, it's very, very difficult. But when I say difficult, it needs times, and usually we do something else. So it's a specific vintage, specific year, but we do.
To me, I find that when you talk about wines, when you talk about wines, you're talking about vintages, and a bottle of wine depicts what happened the entire year. Especially for a winemaker, a wine is we enjoy the wine as consumers, as suppliers. Yeah, we enjoy the wines in that moment. And if we do drink it, we drink it over 3-4 hours, or maybe much shorter period of time. But for a winemaker, that vintage is that's etched, beginning of the vines after you come back from Christmas, the first buds, the first flowering, all the way till the end. So I think to all of us, we will remember 2020 as the COVID year. To all of us, we'll remember 2020 as the challenges. And to the vines, the weather, everything has been good so far. And to one of the previous winemaker that we were chatting about, they don't think that there's going to be a problem because it's 1 meter apart between the rows. So there shouldn't be any challenges between the pickers to harvest, and there shouldn't be any huge challenges that the wine will foresee that it will impede their operations in terms of vinification, because it's not quite a group activity. It's not a social activity when it comes to harvesting. But probably you cannot have your celebration. You always have your celebration on the last day, right? Yeah, that is probably the one that's going to be a little bit more difficult, the celebration. But I think the harvesting itself is not going to be that challenging.
No, it's true. It's not possible to enjoy harvest like a normal harvest. You're right, but we continue to work. COVID, not COVID. It's we see more for the sales. We see more for when people. We don't make a lot of tasting here. It's also the difference. We make some virtual tasting. It's completely strange for me. That's maybe the more important change for us, the tasting, the customers, the importers. We receive nobody. So it's special, and we are maybe also a little bit worried about next year, the sales, when importers, customers will be able to travel. It's we continue here. We continue the job. It's the same, but we have to pay more attention. We have to be more. No kisses. No. We have to be not so closed. It's not normal.
Yeah,
it's not normal. But we do.
And Emerson, thanks for showing the pictures. I think these were beautiful pictures. These were pictures taken by Geraldine just last 3 days.
Yes.
Yeah, the weather is so beautiful in Burgundy now. You see the vines. You see what's happening at the winery, and I think this is something that we will all miss for this year because of the limited traveling. We cannot. You cannot receive your customers at the vineyard. Yeah, and, this is what you can bring to us. What's happening at the vineyards now? Yeah. So, Emerson, do you have any more questions?
Okay, let me check. We don't have any more questions. So, yeah.
Do you want to round out the session for us?
Yes. I think if we don't have any more questions, we thank you very much for participating tonight.
Thank you.
We have a lot of actually activities coming up. So we are cooking a lot of good wineries as well to share with you guys. So it's happening this August, and we have lineup for September and October as well. So please do watch out. And yeah, thank you very much, Geraldine, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure having you. And I think it's our first time for our guests to see you, because you never visited Singapore with us, or we never had an event for the past 5 years. So we thank you very much. So
my pleasure.
So Alice, maybe last few words?
Yeah, so to everyone, thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. And Geraldine can't receive it at the chateau, at the Domaine. So the pictures are here to tell you what's happening there. So till the next time, everyone, thank you and have a good evening. Have a good dinner.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, Geraldine. Bye.